Go ahead and get started. So this is obviously a joint meeting between the DDA and the Board of Trustees. And with a big emphasis on listening and seeing what OHM has put together for this concept, which we're all really looking forward to see. I'll call the meeting to order. If you would record the attendance. I need a motion to approve the agenda if you've had a chance to quickly look at it. It's a shorter agenda tonight. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We can move right on to Article 3, which is the OHM presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony. There are microphones spread on the table up here. So if anybody has any comments, we need to make sure that we're using the microphone. Okay.
We worked pretty hard to get this American flag up on the screen. Do we need to do anything with the pledge?
Oh,
Yeah, let's just do it.
okay. Then we're gonna stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is yep, it's working. Okay. So my name is Tony Slanik. I am a principal at OHM Advisors. And I'm really excited to be here because I think that there's a lot of stuff that is going to happen in Cascade on the quick step that is going to be very exciting for both the community, the leaders, investors, and all the things that we look to support the village. Today's agenda is a pretty easy and quick agenda. We do kind of a project update. What have we been up to? Document review. So you have the document in front of you, as I understand it. So that's the full document. I'm only going to go through portions of the document to kind of get everybody sort of up to speed and understand kind of what we're looking at, and then sort of like what's next. So we started off, project tasks, phase 1, explore. So we've been here four times over the course of a year and really kind of looking at existing conditions, taking inventory, conducting some stakeholder engagement, interviews, listening to the leadership, and really looking at developing the program and understanding kind of the goals of the project and what wants to be had here in the village. Phase 2 is the plan. So we sort of like digested all the things that we heard. And we sort of, thought through from a development, redevelopment scenario, connectivity, investment, placemaking, what do we need to do here in the village to create the environment that we're all looking for? And then phase 3 to kind of finalize and say, all right, let's try to envision this thing. And like, what are we going to see and what do we come to expect? And then how do we get this thing going? So again, technical analysis, how do we get here, stakeholder engagement. And one of the more important things is understanding, especially from my background or the background of OHM, is the best practices. We go to a lot of different places all across the US and we're looking at, how are they doing it? What's differentiating this community from that community? What investment strategies are being had within this community that are different than that community? What economic development tools are available to these particular investors that are not over here in this particular opportunity? What is placemaking? How do you differentiate yourself within the marketplace? How do you create an environment that allows investment to occur, that promotes investment to occur? How does a community create a unique brand and a unique identity that continues to fulfill the needs and the vision of the community so that they feel great about themselves and they feel like they're empowered and they feel that I really want to live here. And you know, the goal here is always to sort of do this cradle to grave, right? I grew up here, I sustained here, and I retire here. And so, you know, creating opportunities to have all three of those, you know, notions in one place at one time, you have to have a pretty dynamic community to be able to do that. And so we look all across the US, you know, both in terms of clients and also just in terms of best practices that maybe we weren't helping them, but we see what happened to just sort of like look at those things and help and offer those opportunities and those solutions within the environment that we're in. So there's sort of like 4 big project goals and, you know, again, like big headings. One is that you have an incredibly unique asset, and that's obviously the river. And it's adjacent to the village in the downtown, and it's super inviting and super amazing. And as a visitor, even with the dam and just the environment that's down by Tassel Park, I mean, there's a huge opportunity there, right? I mean, we all know it. Super important. And this actually started probably in terms of the concept and the idea that it could be a little bit different than it is today is the acquisition of the Tuffy site and the opportunity that gives the community to really differentiate and sort of say, this is kind of where we begin our journey. You guys are in part and parcel, part of that is the bridge and what you guys have done with the bridge and creating a pedestrian access to create, and it feels safe, it feels inviting, it feels secure. And like, you know, being able to promote, you know, that connectivity between both sides of the bridge, both sides of the river are very, very important. So this iconic riverfront, I think, begins to tell the story of Cascade and you know, where our opportunities are related to that. The other one is this sort of vibrant mixed use village center. You know, we want to offer the private sector the flexibility to bring in what they want, what they think is going to be a value add to the community in terms of their businesses. So, you know, retail, commercial, office, whatever that may be, you know, we want to invite those mixture of uses in because the diversity of uses is going to be really important in the sustainability of the community as a whole. Connected and safe streetscape, you know, connections are vitally important. We all know how important transportation is. Making sure that it's a walkable community, making sure that we have safe intersections, making sure that we have demarcated, you know, multimodal opportunities to be able to say, hey, this is where the bike goes, this is where the pedestrian goes, this is where the vehicle goes, slowing down traffic. Creating an inviting area to experience. And then lastly, and most importantly, especially with you guys, you know, from hearing from the stakeholders, and I think that first workshop was this authentic image and brand. The one thing that I took away is that no one ever said, well, I want to be like this. I want to be like that. No one ever said that. We want to be authentically us. Right. And I think that sort of like gets birthed out of 2 things. One is this plan, and number 2 is the form-based code that you guys are currently going through. Those 2 things in combination with whatever you guys do next, and you know, and some more importantly than others, is kind of what you guys will ultimately create as an authentic image and brand. And so, you know, that thing I think is the furthest away in terms of actually implementing it, but I think it's the first step in deciding that you're going to be different than everybody else. And so that's, I can applaud. Every time we go into a community, it's always about, you know, we want to look like this and we want to look like that community over there. And they have this great thing and they have this thing. And that actually didn't happen out of the conversations that I had with the folks I talked to in Cascade. So we go from the goals to the framework of the plan, right? So, you know, we met with leadership, you know, we talked to the community and we're like kind of set the direction kind of for where we go. And that was in terms of conceptual framework was this placemaking elements. How can we, you know, change the quality of life and change the improvements and introduce both, you know, from a public and the private realm, how do we kind of fuse these things together? So we need to rely on businesses to help us do placemaking, but placemaking also occurs on the public side. We have to create the environment to allow placemaking to occur. We have to oftentimes interject placemaking to get a reaction from the private sector to help us create place. So it's a public-private partnership in terms of the concept and a notion, and then there's going to be their money and our money, and then sometimes every once in a while there is that public-private partnership that makes a lot of sense for bigger projects. We also have to embrace development types. You know, there's things that are important to sort of diversify the development types, to offer different levels of intensity and density to sort of create some of the things that we're looking to do within the community as it relates to destination creation, placemaking, offering different services, offering different experiences. And then part of that, everything gets knit together through the roadway typologies. So when I say roadway, it's probably more like multimodal typologies because you're talking about lots of stuff that happens within the right of way that's important to connect people, you know, to place and connect people to people and connect people to neighborhoods and connect community to community. So again, you know, it's the fabric of kind of how we're all woven in terms of, you know, our you know, the transportation notion. So it's important to understand too, like what the plan does. So oftentimes elected officials, leaders, and influencers have a hard time all prioritizing what's important and what's not important because everybody's got a different agenda in terms of like what they want to see. The private sector has an agenda, the public sector has an agenda, each individual within those two entities have agendas. And so it's trying to say, hey, what's the biggest ROI? Right? What do we need to do to identify what's the most important thing to the community versus the least important thing to the community, right? Everything's important because that's what the plan lays out, all the important things to make the changes that we're looking to do. But sometimes this one trumps that one, right? And so you only have $1 to spend. Where do you spend the dollar? You got to look at how the prioritization of these things are. And that's going to happen over time. That's not going to be tomorrow's or today's decision about what's the most important thing, but over time, and as you appropriate money, you have to decide, is this important? What's the ROI? Where's the opportunity here? And how do we leverage that? And what is it going to create? And then what does that do for us, 2 years down the line? And kind of really project and learn and understand kind of what makes sense in terms of your investment strategy related to these different priorities. Again, the plan helps future policy decisions. So you're making a giant policy decision right now related to the adoption of a form-based code. I just want to make sure that everyone heard me because of the cough. Important that, the form-based code that you guys are going through right now is really, really important in defining quality, in defining a place that looks the way you want it to look. Right? From a material standpoint, from a function standpoint, and a position and location standpoint, all these things foster connectivity, foster additional investment, and create place. And so you guys are absolutely doing the right thing. There's the vision plan and the area plan and sort of this idea of like kind of what can it be, but then you're protecting yourself with a code standpoint to say, this is what the way we want it to look if and when that happens to us. And so, applauding you guys. So that's really setting the expectations for the future improvements, right? So you're already knowing what these things are going to look like because you've already protected yourself with the policy and the code work to say, it needs to be stone. It needs to have a roof pitch like this. It needs to be the setback off the roadway needs to look like this. There needs to be a sidewalk. There needs to be a side and rear load parking lot. All these things that you guys are talking about right now, the level of landscaping, how big the signage needs to be, all that stuff is going to help you guys articulate what you guys want to be in terms of what Cascade's image and brand is in the future. It also helps the private sector understand their investment, right? Like, how much is it going to cost me to invest in Cascade? Right? Rather than this place or that place. And then what's the ROI for me? So as it relates to the area plan, you know, there's basically three chapters. There's sort of like the overview of kind of what we've heard and sort of where we want to be. There's the creating the framework, which has a lot to do with, you know, how do we want to do it and what ways do we want to do it? And then there's sort of the chapter 3 is the preferred development concept. So I'll kind of go through those three things. So chapter 1, again, project overview, you know, the planning process, the key planning elements, you know, sort of the explanation of the plan, the goals, and how to use this plan. So that's in your document right now. I don't need to go over it because this is sort of, I'm kind of explaining it narratively, what you guys would read formally. And again, this document, just to understand it a little bit more, is to say that this document's oftentimes used to go to the private sector and say, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is what we're doing. And it becomes a marketing tool, and it also starts to set expectations as to like what they're trying to do versus what you are asking for, right? So this becomes a tool, becomes a negotiating strategy related to how folks look and see at their investment opportunities. Chapter 2, again, is explaining sort of the framework of the plan, our stakeholder sessions, you know, the mapping and sort of like the overall recommendations of the plan as it relates to infrastructure improvements and maybe where private and public kind of mesh, and where we're looking at the private sector to sort of stand up and take control. And then the community work session, key takeaways to kind of help us understand what we heard, which I'll get into a little bit later. So again, this us working with you guys as it relates to the stakeholder sessions. Again, the framework and elements of the plan, you know, the Cascade Village Center, the Village Fringe, the old 28th Street District, you know, Thornapple Center itself. Those are sort of those big land use element spaces. There's also sort of streetscape elements, the primary roadways, secondary roadways, the neighborhood roadways, internal roadways, and then improvements at particular intersections that we think are going to be critical to that connectivity and that safe passage through the village. And then lastly, sort of these placemaking elements, you know, the community anchors, you know, primary and focused green spaces, and then kind of what happens at the different gateways coming into the village and coming into sort of the downtown area. So again, what we showed you guys were sort of three options. One was kind of an intense look at the area related to where we saw opportunities to make the changes that we had within our goal system. A little bit more of a intensity, and then kind of a more of like a transformative concept that really looked at lots of area and kind of how we can reconfigure things to create the environment that we're all looking for. So the last time that we were here, we had all of our boards over here. I explained kind of where we were, and we had the 3 levels of concepts. So sort of like low, medium, and high. And through the dialogue that we had and through my narrative and presentation, and there were lots of questions, and I'm not sure if you guys all watched the video and lots of you were also here too, was a great exchange of information and thoughts and concerns and ideas. And but at the end of the day, what we felt we heard was a few things, but most on the highest level of what we heard was sort of like concept 3, this sort of transformational concept. Cascade was kind of leaning into that transformational concept. Now, anytime you're looking at big transformational things, there's always a 7,000 caveats to that, right? And so again, from a concept standpoint, kind of leaning into the ones that like, wow, these are big moves, but they're exciting moves. So I'm gonna try to do a good job of doing this, but you sort of see the Thornapple Plaza on the upper left-hand corner and kind of reimagining that development, thinking about a mixture of uses, probably largely residential, but certainly some commercial components to it, and really kind of creating a neighborhood out of that Thornapple Plaza. Okay. And so what does that look like? From a form-based code standpoint, it looks exactly like the buildings that you all, through that form-based code process have been dreaming about, right? But from a functionality standpoint, this gets a lot more residents living within the village that creates the economic development engine for the reinvestment within the village as it relates to retail and commercial applications and potentially even office. So again, thinking about what creates what, and also thinking about some of the previous like notions and concepts related to cradle to grave. Are there more residential opportunities within the village to create the village that we want to see in the future? When you kind of drop south to Cascade Road and you look at the Walgreens site, at one point, Walgreens was kind of divesting a little bit in terms of their locations. And we wanted to sort of like capitalize on that idea so that say, hey, if this actually happens within Cascade and Walgreens is willing to give up a space there, this is a prime redevelopment corner for whatever we want to see in terms of a mixture of uses, probably a little bit larger of a building, and really kind of holding that corner and creating a pretty significant development opportunity. Going a little bit, I don't know my directions right now, but going just down the page is really the old 28th Street concept. And this is a pretty big move, right? And so the idea here was that we were going to terminate Old 28th before it intersects with Cascade Road, and essentially making it more of like a cul-de-sac and a neighborhood at the Cascade at Old 28th Street intersection would be a redevelopment opportunity, potentially a pocket park, potentially some other sort of terminus. And then that would over time would create energy for more of a neighborhood application rather than a commercial application. And again, that would amplify the potential residential numbers within the village that would support redevelopment on Cascade Road in terms of commercial and retail properties. Lastly, and probably most excitingly, was thinking about Tassel Park and and the bridge and the properties across the street from Tassel Park. And certainly, and most importantly, thinking about the Tuffy site and what are we going to do with the Tuffy site that creates energy for the community and likely might be the catalyst project that everyone can kind of get behind and get excited about is celebrating Tassel, celebrating Cascade, owning that corner now coming off the bridge and creating some exciting element and amenity to the community. And also thinking about the encroachment onto the river, activating the riverfront. Imagine kids with fishing poles, imagine being able to come down and actually touch the water. Imagine, excitement in the park and people walking and talking and then whatever would happen on that kind of corner of Thornapple and River Drive and Cascade. When we talked about some of the refinements of Tassel Park, within the concepts that we showed, we got a lot of feedback from that workshop related to the speed of traffic on Thornapple River Drive. There are many residents that were in that meeting that spoke to 40, 50 mile an hour traffic on Thornapple River Drive, and begging the township to address some issues related to the speed of traffic. And think about it, you guys don't have to think about it because you guys live it. That's a pretty high speed adjacent to a public park. And so how do we look at Thornapple River Drive in the future in partnership with Kent County to make sure that we get a road that serves the community, but then also addresses the safety concerns and the road noise and the safety of being adjacent to a public park, and certainly within the context of the village. So those are sort of the big concepts that came out of the plan. And so, so within the plan that's in front of you, you'll sort of see the preferred concepts as it relates to the riverfront district and kind of what, you know, may or may not happen in the future related to development and reinvestment. You can also see some of the pictures of things that we're sort of talking about that align with the form-based code that you guys are currently working on in terms of residential infill, local commercial infill, and then what streetscape improvements from a character image, what are we trying to portray and what are we trying to create within the context of the policy that we're currently working on. So the key next steps as it relates to the preferred concept was to obviously utilize the township's new form-based code to implement the overall development vision. To reconfigure Thornapple River Drive to promote pedestrian safety and connectivity and then embellish and become part of Tassel Park in my mind. Reimagine Tassel Park as a community asset, come down to touch the river, experience the waterfront, and everyone's got that water edge public engagement that I think I've seen countless times in my career. Just being able to engage that water, being able to have functions within the park, having lots of connectivity from the neighborhoods that are adjacent to the park, really create a dynamic village in downtown. And obviously from a private sector standpoint, when programmed correctly, can create a lot of opportunities for investment and reinvestment within existing properties within the village. Another sort of conversation, or at least key next step, was that we felt that, again, Cascade Road's speed was another one of the things that were sort of talked about. It could be slower. The traffic could be quieter. We heard from one resident, actually probably two or three, that those pavers on the crosswalks that make that sound when you go over top of them, that's road noise that wasn't desirable from the neighbors that live nearby. And so again, thinking through how we articulate the urban design, what materials we use, and then are there opportunities to slow down traffic with mid-block crossings along Cascade that would give presence to the driver, so the driver is not sailing through down Cascade Road, and then we start to manage that traffic a little bit better and manage that speed a little bit better. I'm getting old now, so I have to like really look at this because it's so small. Identify key streetscape and property acquisition strategies to transform Old 28th Street. So that goes back to, do we cul-de-sac that? Do we create a different district by eliminating that access there? And what does that do to the existing properties there related to development opportunities and reinvestment opportunities? And then present the concepts and vision to developers and potential property owners. And that's important, right? So this document oftentimes is used as a marketing tool to existing property owners to say, hey, this is what we expect. This is where we're trying to go. This is what we're trying to create. And so, again, important stuff. And what it does is conveying two things. One is the expectation, but number two is, what is the public willing to provide in terms of investment to help you leverage your opportunity? So through all this dialogue that we've had with the leadership and with the community and property owners, one thing that really resonated and what we heard was in concert with each other, there's two sort of things to move forward. One is to say, let's address the speed on Thornapple River Drive with our partner Kent County, and let's look at Tassel Park, specifically a Tuffy site, and what do we create there that becomes one of the catalysts for the plan and one of the catalysts for the form-based code in terms of like moving things forward. So with that, I'm gonna have Josh come up and sort of explain in a very high level the thought behind the park. And I think that there's a couple things that, you know, from a higher end space, higher end thought process is that there are lots of mature trees on this particular piece of property, and we want to maintain and sustain those trees and make sure that we continue to have that canopy. We absolutely want to engage the river, and we know that that's super important and super successful and a catalyst for visits and a huge amenity and a huge and something fun to do. We also want to sort of like terrace down the park and kind of give you that step-by-step drop down into the park. But along those terracings is a series of experiences. One of the things that's wonderful about Tassel that we want to keep talking about, I think we're too close, is continuing and maybe amplifying and breathing life more into that art space. You know, is there more things that we can do with the art? Is there opportunities to get more art? You know, can we anchor the corner of Thornapple River Drive and Cascade with a gorgeous piece of art that complements the investment that you made to the bridge and offers us a gateway experience coming into Cascade, or at least coming into the village. So Josh is gonna kind of walk through some ideas that we sort of talked about, but I want the caveat here, the heavy caveat is that this is just the concept. I think the next step for Cascade is to lock down a program of what you actually want to see at the park. And so that the next step can engage that process and offer you some ideas that we can ultimately get done in the near term.
Thank you, Tony. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Helms, Director of Design with OHM. And yeah, I was tasked with kind of creating a vision, an initial vision of Tassel Park. And as Tony mentioned, it's not even really even at a conceptual level. I think it's us infusing best practices into the site. So things like, you know, the principles of pedestrian circulation, vehicular circulation, getting down to the water, the preservation of trees, what kind of program elements maybe doesn't Tassel Park have currently that we could infuse into the site. And really it started at the Tuffy site. And we did a plan for the Tuffy site, and it was kind of like, okay, well, this could be a start of something really cool, you know. And I think it's a great way for us to start saying, okay, well, we want to do something with the Tuffy site. How do we kind of marry, you know, the Tassel Park with that? And I think it's cool. It could be a really huge, iconic park. I think the biggest thing you can see here, this is one of the renderings we did. You know, we have multiple connections to the water. We have steps for kayaks, for small boats to come and dock. There's a terraced effect along the water. There's a boardwalk near the dam to really get that sound. You know, those are type of elements that really not so much the concept, but it's taking in context where the park is and infusing best practices at this time. And then the conceptual level is when we're going to start to really vet those things and make sure that they really do work. But this is a vision, and I think it's a good start.
So yeah, the next few slides then are just basically little vignettes of the park and kind of like what might be seen. Again, from a very conceptual level, is kind of creating public space connectivity. Is there opportunities for, you know, amphitheater, for small venues, for picnics, for, you know, just different uses that, you know, dynamic uses that we can use along the riverfront.
Yeah. And then this is an example of the terracing effect that Tony mentioned. You know, so you're at the Tuffy site looking back along the entire property, and you can get a pretty dramatic view, you know, and it could be for events, it could be for a lot of different things, but we wanted to showcase that the elevation change is going to be important when it comes to the design of the park. This is a small amphitheater space. It's a little bit more intimate, or a lot more intimate than what's over here at the library. The thought is that it could be programmed a totally different way. So that's just a different way that we wanted to showcase the elevation change in a more subtle way. This is the stadium steps, we're calling it, or the kind of like the staircase down to the water. It could be big chunks of concrete infused with different landscapes, soften it a little bit, but the thought is that kayaks and boats could come and be able to dock at this location. And also you can come and sit and enjoy lunch.
But back to best practices, I mean, like a lot of riverfront development we've seen, like this is something that is a home run related to people that sunbathe, that want to be next to the water.
Yeah.
There's families, there's picnics, there's activities that happen within this terracing structures. You know, there's people bringing down boats, there's people bringing lunches. You know, there's lots of activity that kind of happen along that waterfront. And that's again, another one of those incredible amenities that really you know, just make space and create that placemaking element that, you know, the village is looking to do.
Yeah, and in multiple different hardscapes as well. So introducing clay pavers, introducing buff wash, specialty concrete, introducing different colors, things like that. It will be really important with the design. As you can see, some of the reinforced terracing effect that, you know, we'll have to try to connect ADA accessibility throughout the site, but also we're going to have to utilize steps for some of the things most likely we want to do with the park.
One of the things too, you guys, that we looked at was, you know, there, when we were here the first time with the concept, one of the things that we noticed is like, okay, you know, we didn't imagine the new space with the existing bathrooms and facility. One of the things that we learned is that those buildings, those bathroom facilities architecturally mirror the dam. And it has incredible historic integrity that we want to keep within the design, and we want to kind of integrate with some of the ideas that we're having related to the program and kind of how all that sort of meshes together. And again, I think that, you know, in the future forward, sort of how we use this amenity space and, you know, how we think about public gathering, is there buildings adjacent to the existing bathroom facility that are more sort of jewel box or, you know, type of architecture that's sort of like this transparent, you know, window, sort of like, you know, gathering space, you know, small wedding space, small, you know, family gathering space that's within the park, could potentially be rented or however you guys program that. But it becomes sort of this really, you know, elegant, wonderful component that really helps the park become more utilized in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's all about back to the village plan, right? So you're creating a destination for people to come to and then infuse itself into some of the other concepts that we've kind of put out there. Paying homage to what's there now. So, you know, there's existing fire pit. I think it's really neat. It's near the water, but kind of elevating that in a different way. And I think that's what we're tasked to do. Some of the sculpture pieces that are out there are wonderful, you know, so how do we showcase those sculpture pieces in a way that reinforces what's there now, but then also introducing others? That'll be important for us. This is an image of the streetscape. So currently, you know, we wanted to propose on-street parking. So maybe take some of the parking lots that are within the park and then bringing them out to the road. And we have other ways to actually add additional parking further than this along the roadway, which I think it would be really successful. So if this really does become a destination park, I think we're going to need that. So that's an investigative tool that we're going to have to really look into. So
we felt like it was super important to pull the parking out of the park, put it onto North Thornapple River Drive. We think it's just on the park side, and then we'd also can get, you know, an incredible amount of spaces. If we don't actually use this method, that's parallel parking, but if we do like a 60-degree where they're actually head-in parking we can get twice as many spaces. And so we can actually get 3 times more spaces than you currently have at the park now. And then think about it from the terms of if you're having a festival or any kind of, you know, art festival, farmer's market, whatever that might be, you know, do we put in electric, you know, conduits and boxes into some of the stalls to allow for food trucks to plug in and, you know, and kind of create that, activate Thornapple River Drive and activate the park and for that kind of festival environment. So again, just thoughts related to kind of potentially how it's used. But, and certainly, you know, we can maintain the passive nature of the park now, but then we could also create some opportunities to activate the park in the future as the Parks and Rec Department and the leadership decide on kind of what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think it really is, it's gonna be a mixture of a lot of different things, passive, active,
Yep.
and that's the goal. So as you
So,
can see.
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
that's sort of the overall sort of vision of the village as it relates to the plan. We sort of articulated, but we felt got a lot of gravity and a lot of excitement, which was kind of looking at Tassel Park again and kind of potentially what it could be in the future. And so, you know, from our standpoint, I think from the leadership standpoint, there was sort of this push towards saying like, what is the next step related to the village plan? Your very next step is the adoption of the form-based code. I think the next step after that could potentially be looking at that Tuffy site and looking at Tassel Park and doing a little bit of a reinvestment on what that looks like and kind of rethinking the configuration to support some of the thoughts related to the plan. So with that, I'll open up the questions. Yeah, so you guys hired,
Yeah, no.
right? I mean, Andrea, why don't you, I mean, this isn't what we're doing. I'd like for you to answer that a little bit better than me.
I have two.
Traditional zoning kind of handles. Traditional zoning kind of handles, number of parking spaces, uses, height. And it doesn't necessarily, it kind of separates all these things. So the form-based code, what we say is, this is the look, the feel, the character that we're trying to accomplish, and here are the tools to get there. So we're looking more at facade, we're looking at what's called a door yard, so a door yard is the elements that go into where you, like, the front of the facade. We're looking at the material, we're looking at the roof, versus just how many parking spaces do you have, how many trees do you need, and what are you going to use?
Sue, it's your code. It's your code in a way that articulates an intent versus like locking you in specifically into exactly what you're asking for, right? So like, so there can be things like, you know, we require stone, you know, it's setback stuff. It's like, where do we want your parking? Rear side, you know, side loaded and rear side, you want your building presented to the street. We want certain types of roof pitches. And so the form-based code allows the flexibility for a designer and an owner to meet your requirements without getting it so specific that it's nauseating, everything looks the same.
Oh, in a word, more flexible, no. We're not, so we don't want Thomas Carla, I don't even want to word that, but Thomas Carla will not, or Donald Future will not be in this contained area. So it's not so much it's commercial, residential, industrial, that doesn't matter so much. It's that when these already developed areas in the village area are rebuilt, which they will be, or they're redeveloped, we're forcing the people coming in to do quality redevelopment that's not a strip mall, that we're forcing like better materials, more of the goal is more quaint and timeless. It's forcing quality so that, and it's not every developer will be able to afford it, but we're not looking for every developer because economically we're doing well. We're looking for the right developer who will bring the right kind of redevelopment so that we don't get the following in dollars. That sounds terrible. We're trying to, only certain developers will be able to do it. Does that make sense? For example, that lawyer's office on Old 28th Street, the first time they came in, their initial concept kind of looked like a gray, white, and black version of Domino's Pizza. So they revised that to kind of come more towards the look we're going for, more quaint. We don't need
We're trying to avoid trendy.
And doesn't form-based code address better the interrelationships between the buildings and the other spaces that are public spaces and
For
how they
sure.
interact with each other?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the site, the site development, the roadway configuration, and the building orientation.
Yeah,
You know, those are all the things that are in control. What you can't control is the business. You can't zone away businesses and like what type of business it is. But what you can do is you can elevate the quality, as Grace is saying, to the point where that business doesn't make any sense anymore. Right? And so they automatically weed themselves out because like my spray off car wash can't meet the form-based code requirements to allow this to occur. So even though it's an allowed use, they can't get it to work there because of the configuration, because of the mandate of the form-based code.
And
But-
we can't go in and redevelop private property or take it over, but this is the one thing we can do to proactively ensure that when we do get redevelopment, it's redevelopment that.
That's it.
Enhances character instead of just becoming more 28th Street extended farther.
And fits with this vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's an incredible tool that a lot of communities are using. And, you know, again, applause to Cascade's leadership because that's the right way to go right now, for
Yeah.
sure.
and it should be hand in hand for sure, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, comments? Yeah.
Absolutely.
First off, I guess I would say I really like with respect to Tassel Park, I really like how the parking has been moved away from the river. I feel like the riverfront is where people want to be. It's not where they want to park. So you did a nice job with that. I'm hopeful that as plans unfold, we're able to try to preserve some of the aspects of the park that maybe have been donated by people in the community in the past and try to use those in some way within the park. And
Agreed.
I'd like to see a connection between and maybe this is getting a little too detailed, but in some of the stone walls and things in the park, I feel like the village area should have the same stone throughout the village area. So like the walls that are at the Memorial Park across the street and at the museum, I think they're, you know, a stone. It could be nice to try to tie that together. I think in the past, when they built the wall at Old 28th Street, they used different stone than they used at the wall across the street. And it kind of doesn't look right. So
For sure, yeah.
and then when you talk about the Thornapple Center, I really hope that we have an opportunity to explore the possibility of having 28th Street come through that center and somehow tie into Thornapple River Drive. I know I've said this before, but and I know it's a lofty goal, but it would be great for Thornapple River Drive coming out of Ada to intersect with the end of 28th Street so that we don't have all those people either racing past Tassel Park, as you mentioned, or trying to make a right-hand turn onto Cascade and a left-hand turn onto 28th Street.
Mhm.
So those are my thoughts.
No, those are great comments for sure.
Two comments. I think one huge thing is that in no way is the intent to connect it to the supply that we will. Speaking to the DDA, sorry, on the DDA side or the board side to run out any businesses or push out any businesses within the village. I think we all, it's actually the opposite. The idea is to support the local businesses and to bring in new businesses that we can, that the community wants and the community will support. So that's one of my comments. I think there's been some talk about we're trying to run out businesses, and that is in no way the intent of the DDA or of the board in any way. And then two, I think everybody really needs to keep in mind, change is inevitable. And change is gonna happen whether we want it to or not. And the idea is that we steer the change in a way that the community wants and that the community supports and the community wants. Because it's gonna happen. And if we don't do something to steer the change, it's gonna happen and it's gonna turn into stuff that we don't want, or like Grace said, the stuff that's cheap or that's
doesn't fit in, or we're gonna have one building here that looks a certain way and another building here that looks a certain way. And I think people need to keep that in mind, that change is inevitable. If you love the way it looks right now, it's not gonna look that way in 10 years, whether we have a vision and decide what we're gonna, hopefully it will look like in the future, it's gonna happen. And so the idea is to give that change in a way that the community wants it to look, in the future.
And we hope that the plan and the form-based code, when they come together and they're all one unit, does exactly what you just said, Wendy.
Andrew Smith and I had a meeting, actually it worked out that it was today, with, the relative of Leslie Castle, who found, who was the kind of the philanthropist, the private donor. And since I've been here, Cascade Township doesn't have any current relationships with private donors, private philanthropists that would be willing to reinvest, or that have been reinvesting into the township, like placemaking. But it was a really helpful meeting, and it actually, they were able to give us some history, and also, so that we're not going in blind, and like the initial concept, we had talked to people, right? So they talked about keeping some of the things, and it was kind of a mesh between some of these ideas, but then also kind of restoring it or keeping it a little bit, there's a lot more there that we can keep instead of just.
Yeah, we completely agree. Obviously the art, obviously the existing structures that complement the architecture of the dam. I know there's some, there's some special places within the park. And I think that the next step is to identify those sacred cows, make sure that we honor the history, honor the folks that contributed in the way that they did. And then, work around those elements to create a park that the community wants, to renew it. And then obviously to majorly address the Tuffy site, because that's kind of the eyesore right now, right? Coming off the bridge, that's a huge opportunity for you guys to say, this is us. And so right now, we have a huge opportunity for us. So again, it's back to engagement, it's back to talking to everybody and kind of creating an idea of what that wants to be.
Yeah, and I think too, with that, I think elevating those things, and making them, make sense within the new space.
I kind of like the idea of, you mentioned that, building the housing the restrooms is kind of complementary to the dam, which is kind of trying to make me look like old, which I like, and I think if you did another structure, it would be good to keep that consistent. And keeping in mind that we have the old stone house, we have this library and the pavilion, the red brick, which is kind of an older timeless type style. I think it would be good to, if you can build new to kind of look old, to kind of keep that sense of the history, this area, and not get too contemporary, but rather to keep it consistent with structures that we already have.
Yeah, there's two philosophies. One is to say, you have an existing structure and you replicate the design details that continue that look. The other way to go is to say, this is a unique structure, it's historic, and you do something like transparent that doesn't even highlight itself. It's a complement to the existing structure that's historic. And so that all of a sudden that thing becomes muted and transparent and kind of goes away, and you're refreshing the historic value of the existing structure by not trying to compete with it or trying to mirror it and try to become it. So I think that the next step is to really think through that and decide, what does Cascade want to do? Do we want to continue this and perpetuate it, or do we want to pivot and celebrate what we have and then go in a different direction? And that's a community decision.
Well, so you have these two different areas and different things. You have the stone parts and then you have the plastic brick stuff. And what features of those do you want the businesses to have in between those two places? To bring that out as well. To do that stuff. Those are some fun things and design elements that we really require to those businesses to bring those two things together and keep that being. I have not a hard time, but, personally, I want to stay a bedroom community because we are lucky that, like, people always talk about growth, economic growth, but growth is okay if you need it, but really the thing is quality of life for the residents that are already living here. And so this isn't about you directly, but it seems like planners are always like trendy and overdoing it and just grow. I don't want to attract people. I just want to please the people that are here. And frankly, I want to keep people out. Like, we don't need, I don't want to keep people out, but I do. You know what I mean?
Cascade.
So like, it's kind of like less is more in some ways, and I think in the long term, that helps our property values. It sounds like an old curmudgeon, but from my perspective, I would like, that corner's gotta have a little bit of height, so it doesn't look like you're on a prairie, but ultimately, less is more, like fieldstone brick, and I think but it seems like modern designers, not you guys, because obviously you're flexible, but like, you always want to go with the trend and overdo everything, and it's more like, if you just resist that, take a chill pill, and then just like highlight the river, the trees, go with quality materials and chill out, because it's a park, you don't need to like have an amusement park. So I really like some of this, but then also the CAD or whatever type of computer programs it is, it just sort of seems more sterile, and so it's hard.
Easy to
It's easy to look at. It's hard to keep, I think it needs to have character and timelessness and buck the trends, and I think it'd be easier, you know, back in the day when we got those pretty watercolor sketches or something, so it's not against you guys, but, and then the whole density thing, like, I know you need some density, but you need a lot of density, like, we have good tenants, there are good tenants, good types of businesses, so I know it's just a fine balance, and there's a lot of good opportunity, I just don't want to overdo it. And because ultimately, like, we are a bedroom community and we are close to Grand Rapids, so we don't have to like be inflated and have all different, like, just don't think we're trying to attract anybody other than people are jealous that they want to live here. Does that come?
Yeah, I mean, I think that over the course of our conversations, you've always talked about elevating the quality of life within Cascade. I don't
Like
think,
destination for bikers and walkers and stuff, but we're not looking to like, we're fortunate that we can be picky because economically we are doing very well. And so it's more like attracting things that kind of elevate the, like restaurants, everyone's saying, we need restaurants. But the reality is we're still a suburban community, like we talk about walkability, but the reality is we don't walk in one talk about it, like we're still like suburban. You know.
But we do have a very wonderful trail system, and I do that if we made walkability more accessible to the village, it would be. I live a mile from the village.
For places to do,
I want
once
to do that.
Yeah.
Like, for things to do, once you that.
I think we have to, first with the road commission, the one way headed towards Thorncrest, Thornhill, like away from this intersection. Making it after Tassel, but, and then before Berger, doing that one way so that we can get the bikers and pedestrians. Sorry, Sue, I'm gonna do that one. But I don't know. Me too. Because that gets that whole neighborhood, that whole Berger neighborhood, can able to come down.
Bike and walk.
And realistically, that road is, used to be a natural, like it's winding with the shoulder, like that's not made for. If the goal is to let people zip through from shortcut on 36th Street, I have zero problem with them spend 30 seconds, it's not even 30 seconds.
I was gonna touch on the biking side of it. It's not like you can get down to a micro level, but we're part of the pathway system, and for people to engage the park, making it very accessible for bikes or to stage their bikes while they enjoy the park. But there's definitely element that's just a natural integration. And I think you've done a great job of when you bring the parking out to the street on Thornapple River, when you do drive, when you parallel park, you're gonna calm traffic by virtue of doing that. The
Yep.
cars coming in and out, and people slow down, but the element I haven't seen quite yet is how do you activate that Tuffy site and the new enhancements to that bridge, maybe you're getting to that where that you can start calming traffic by virtue of making it feel a little bit more closed in.
Yep.
And also just rubbernecking, right? This is beautiful, elements of this park and the gateway into the community that we have to, and we can't rely on, hey, if we say to Kent County, if we just want a slower road, I think we've been saying that for years, we're not gonna get there.
Yeah, I think it's a configuration of the road, it's an alignment of the road, it's a road diet, I think it's on-street parking, I think it's streetscape elements. I think it's relooking at the Cascade, Thornapple River Drive intersection. I think it's pinching the lanes down a little bit so that you don't feel like you can go so fast. I mean, right now, it's like the Autobahn, right? And so there's just too much room. And so you feel very comfortable going excessive speeds. And so by pinching that thing down and getting it to, align with the nature of the road, which is fairly, basically like residential off of a commercial district, I think that, we just have an over-designed road. And I think that, if we can leave the curb on the residential side, and then we bring the curb and actually expand the park by pushing the curb toward the resident, so basically you're creating more park space, right? You're creating more streetscape opportunity, and then and you're slowing down traffic all at the same time. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of look at how that's all configured, but I think it's part and parcel to how we design the park and what the park ultimately ends up being. And I think we've, got some clarity today about just, the park wants to be similar to the park it is today. I think we're adding a few elements to it, right? Connectivity, walkability, getting down to the river itself, access to that. Is there an opportunity to kind of swing up underneath the bridge and make a connection, a pedestrian connection to the other side of the bridge, go under Cascade Road and the Cascade Bridge and make a connection up? There's a lot of things that we're thinking about. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like that's the next evolution of the plan, is to kind of get into the details that you're talking about, Scott.
I say is that soon Kent County doesn't play along. Are there elements ahead of time with the design of that, activating that tuffy space that helps make it feel a little bit more dense and closed in a bit and actually very eye-catching, that helps calm traffic by virtue of the design and intent of it?
Yep.
If that makes sense, because I feel that's always going to be a rub with Kent County, right, longer and different.
Yeah.
It's just our reality.
As a team, that's always been our goal with the Tuffy site, especially whether that's a building, whether it's a sculpture, whether that's something that's iconic and really a gateway experience.
And just in some preliminary conversations with Kent County, they seem pretty receptive of making, changes there, so. Through the planning process, that's been kind of a conversation, so. Just openness to having a conversation about what, the future might look like. Thornapple River Drive.
Yeah, and especially if the public comes out and keep food at home, but we bring the residents that live around there with pitchforks, they'll let them do it.
Well, I think that tying Thornapple River Drive and the 48th Street really helps with that too. You don't have where people trying to pass through there. You're routing that traffic all and down corners, so it never goes through the village right there.
Yeah, and that area can take it.
The Thornapple River Drive, if that somehow went through or around behind Thornapple Center and connected to 28th,
You're talking about.
all the traffic from Ada would go right up 28th Street and make a left at DW instead of going past Castle Park or zipping through the village.
I just don't think realistically that can happen.
Well, and
I don't think
the other
it's a challenge.
rush of traffic comes east on Cascade Road, a lot of it fast. Because they're coming from off the expressway, through from Lowell.
Jade?
Yeah, I just want to comment real quickly on the relationship with the road commission. Eric is here as well. We've had great dialogue with the road commission on all of these ideas. None of them are obviously set in stone. They're open for discussion and sitting at the table. So I know Eric's gotten some feedback from them, so have you, in regards to what it would take to do some further studies about the traffic. So the roads and the project and whatever we do with the roads would probably have to run separately than the park improvements, just because from a timing perspective, a funding perspective, and then just coordinating with the different entities like the road commission. Not to say we can't plan the park accordingly for future road projects, but we just need to keep in mind that we've got to continue working them. But they've been very receptive to some of the ideas that have been presented. And to be honest with you, we have a lot of ideas with the bill. I mean, there's so many different things that have been kind of put all in front of the table that it's like, where do you start? I think through some of the conversations, it makes the most sense, because the only thing about this proposal, this concept that we are truly in control of is the park, and that's kind of phase one. And so it makes sense to start with the Flannel River Drive project and what ifs with the road commission.
One thing I'd like to bring up, and I think that almost everybody here wasn't part of Cascade when we went through this, is be careful as you're working on the site up by the fowling center, is as you change that around, you're gonna have water problems coming downhill towards the river. And like my business alone has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars dealing with that water problem to solve it. And we don't want to get it started again, because we have dealt with many, many floods in our business.
Yeah.
From that development going in there in the first place.
Okay.
So
That, what is it, when it's, is it impervious or pervious? Whatever is there now to the opposite. Yeah, if you just pave everything and then you're down below it, you got the short end of it.
yeah, we have probably had 15 floods over the past 30 years.
And that would be.
And Kent, are you from Kent County Road Commission? Did he just say? Oh, okay. So like, the only reason it finally got solved is because one time a Kent County Road Commissioner was standing in our building with water flowing over his boots. And, oh no, we had many, many meetings with them and they did not care.
That would happen on air, swap.
So like, that is, like, I'm all for this whole concept. These guys know I love it, but that is something that will,
To be aware of.
Got it.
like,
That's
really.
Loud and clear.
Which would help, which hopefully help, but I think there's some berms up above that finally help. We have a really ugly berm that I think the snowplow took out this year. But
I think there's no stormwater.
we have had to put drains in at our own cost. So anyway, just be really, really aware that that causes a lot of problems downtown.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's great.
Maybe any other construction things like electrical or things that we should be thinking of early on to support the future things that will come?
Underground wires for all the stuff that we didn't realize that public site.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of utility lines, even along Thornapple River Drive on the park side, that we have to sit there and decide, like, is it, is it cost effective, which it isn't, right? To bury those things, does it really distract from your view and from the things that we want to do? I don't think it does, but that's a conversation that needs to be happening with regard to the design, because that's a heck of a line item to put those things in the ground. So, can you move that curb and basically strategically locate those utility poles within the confines of an island to support, and then have on-street parking and kind of like work them into the design to save yourselves money, but also still get the parking needs that we have for a revised Tassel Park. So again, we're thinking through all that stuff, but at the same time, it's like, we're not there yet, right? Because this is just high level, like, hey, should we even think about Tassel Park?
And maybe there's a happy medium where at the intersection, those lines are buried. At least,
Yeah.
as you go down.
Which then allows us to sort of rethink that intersection. But again, costs, lots of costs. Scott.
As a resident right downtown Cascade right now, I'm gonna echo a lot of these comments just for the record. The speed is the number one concern. Some people really care about that. Number two is Castle Park and Tuffy is gonna be, it's our first handshake to what we're doing.
Mhm.
But we want to do it right, right? That's what they're gonna see, what's going on with Tuffy. And lastly, in my perspective, the cul-de-sac in 28th Street, which I really endorse, and I like it like that. I'm just kind of concerned because there's businesses along there that have been there for a long time, that are Cascade residents. And I'm just worried about how they would accept that. And as a resident, I would love it, but I just don't know how they would. JTs and, all of them. In the car dealership or the maintenance place.
They were actually, I think it's good, I think it's gonna turn
in the near, at some point, I think, because when we were out walking, I think it was you guys. No, it wasn't. Anyways, we were walking on 28th Street. No, for developer day. We walked. Anyways, this guy from he owns 2 little businesses on the side of Walgreens, came out and was a lifelong resident, but interested in.
Oh, maybe they are. So it's just gonna be, some type of interaction liaison. Yes.
But at least if it does turn over, it's gonna turn over the right way because it's form-based code.
But I also think that there's ways to look at the planning, incorporating some of the businesses that are already building. You know, it's like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but figure out how, because if we're talking mixed use, then we want mixed use.
For sure.
So if there's a restaurant that's in there that's walkable by all the residents that would be in that new development.
Right.
There's a way to make.
Again, this is, this is a phased approach. Say someone come in there and they grab 3 or 4 parcels and they started their residential project, right? And then it caught fire and all of a sudden there's other opportunities that sell, business owners that are on their way out, like want to sell. And then all of a sudden there's 2 more parcels available, right? Over time, that could happen.
That business and you own that property, let's say there's a 3 acres there, because there's a big lot behind, I don't think they'll say own the lot behind. But what if I'm a huge developer and I come in and say, I want to purchase this, and I'm gonna give you a couple $1 million for this land, but in my redeveloping of this property, I'm gonna keep your business, we're gonna move it maybe up closer to Old 29th Street, and I'm gonna give you a 30-year lease to keep your business, we'll rebuild your business there so you can stay within the community, and I'll give you a 30-year lease to use this part of the building.
Yep.
Those are things that I think developers look at when they look at these places, if they look at these businesses that are long-term, that the community does support. And, if you're the owner of that business, that can be a win-win for you. You might think, oh, great, I can get some stuff out of this, I don't have to do all this stuff. I can keep my business that the community loves, I can move into a new space, they're gonna support me.
Yep.
And so it's not, I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but I'm just saying as an example, these are just things outside of the box that I don't think really could happen.
Yeah, from our end, we've seen that a million times. It's like, especially with those iconic, or like long-lasting historic businesses, and they want to like integrate them in the development, because that's the red carpet to the community. It says, hey, we're keeping these guys and we're helping them survive, even, because we see them as an asset to the community.
Most people cringe at the density, or do they want, so a lot of the pictures look okay, but they're for a more urban environment. And if you wanna retain a residential kind of quaint feel, it's kind of most people, that's just the assumption that people want to grow, or because.
You guys don't.
No.
You told me that 200 times. But I think that at the same time, it's the cradle to grave philosophy that, once in Cascade can stay in Cascade. And so, offering different residential solutions, oftentimes economics force higher density levels to justify the land costs, to create the environment to allow for the flexibility of the different, age types and different generational applications of residents. So I hear you. And so what we did was kind of take a step back and let form-based code dictate how it feels and the proportions and the scale of the buildings that you might feel like are urban. But the configuration of things is very like neighborhood centric and walkable and inviting. And so it's like that, it's that balance between density and urban design that allows you to create the things that you're looking for from a brand and image, and kind of feeling, but then offers flexibility to developers to come in and help, get a market share that might be missing here.
Everybody, all the developers, because West Michigan is booming, they always come in and they always want to be the exception. They always want higher density and they always talk about you need to serve the people in their twenties, all of which, if you're in your, I couldn't live here, I couldn't afford it, and I wasn't whining about it.
Right.
Like, we don't owe 20-year-olds a spot. Anyways, it's all about profit making based on density and making it valuable, which is, I think we resist that trend. Because as West Michigan grows, it'll make us more desirable to total line and require quality.
Right,
We
and
don't
again,
need density necessarily, other than some, but.
yep, and honestly, like, unless I accidentally said the D word, it was intensity. How do we intensify the development opportunities, not increase density? So we're not saying you go up 7 stories. It's wherever the form-based code, allows it to happen. That's exactly what you'll get, Grace.
And really demographic wise, what we've seen in other communities is that some sort of a village center or some sort of part of it all redevelopment, there's a lot of seniors that come into that development where it's empty nesters, it's people that just want to be around all the action. They don't want to leave Cascade and they just come down and live in the village center. So you have that too,
And we talked about in the workshop too, that the exact sort of scenario was sort of that, like, I'm done with my 3,500 square foot house but I still want to maintain I still want to be within Cascade, but I don't have an option because I'm either I have my 3,500 square foot house or I'm out.
I can't believe the lantern that Thornhill and Ramble got like $1 million basically for 2, and they're condos, like that's insane. And so I guess we are in a fortunate place where we don't need to give in to certain developers because the market is there and that's already.
Yeah, the market's there and your form-based code is going to be there within a few minutes, how fast you guys can get this thing done. And then you have all the tools to control exactly what you're looking to control it.
All the developers, they, oh, you're never gonna get that, or whatever, that's just, we don't want it, but we will find the right developer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't let them do
That's
that.
what I was gonna ask. So we have a concept here that we're hoping that we're inviting what we want into our community. Is there a different aspect or a different thought process that says, we want this, what will it take to get to our?
You're setting an expectation right now with the plan and the code. And then you're saying, this is what we're allowing right now. And then they'll figure it out. If they,
Yeah, right now, we don't really have, like, maybe our neighboring communities may have done that.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm just thinking out of the box, I've just heard other townships say,
Yeah.
Just what do you want? Go to those people first and say, what would it take for you to come?
right, again, back to the plan is showing them the plan, saying this is what we're looking for. We know that you have a unit mix or a model that very consistent with what we're looking for. And so we want to have a discussion with you.
Yeah.
So proactive versus reactive, right, Scott?
I'd rather expand the park across the street instead of that big 3-story apartment. Move the cul-de-sac down a little closer to the west.
Oh, like the term, like.
We're not expecting an apartment complex
Might
in
have
the village.
No way do I see that there.
Talking about across, is he talking about across from Tassel? Yeah. In the concept, they were like townhomes. And
I don't want a townhome. They're 3-story.
No. 1.5.
Things tall, you get really tall.
But that could be more park. If we planned,
But we don't.
it could be more park.
if you acquire those properties, then it could absolutely be that. We actually had a conversation earlier today that like, can the partner, is there like a, sorry, guys. Is there like a blow up? Oh, yeah. Yeah, can like right where the letter C is, Timmy? Like, can, if that parcel was purchased, can that be more parking to support the park? Right, that's shared amongst the B and potentially visitors of A. right? So there's lots of configurations is my point. It doesn't, whatever this says is is an intent, but it doesn't mean that's going to happen, right? And what you're saying is like, hey, let's go, if there's a strategy that says, let's go acquire the houses across the street that come up for sale so that we can transition those to potential Tassel Park expansion, that's a strategy, and over time you can accomplish that. Right, but again, it can happen, it's just whether, if you want it to happen.
I think that's a key thing, is that we want-
It's super flexible.
We've got the planning firm that's been working on this for a year, well, not that, anyway, it's gonna be huge in preventing the explosion of.
What's your dollar number on that part right there? Make a note.
Hard to say when you don't have a final.
Just a round number.
Yeah. We've looked at it
Here.
pretty good. Well, I'm just saying, I'm trying to like give it all the qualifiers, right? Give me 10 asterisks and all, around 10 million.
Did that, you know, how we scaled back, like we kept in the, existing gazebo and bathroom area, and then also took out at the corner did the 10 million figure come after that? Or-
Kind of where we are right now, as it relates to all the changes that we made. So again, those bathrooms, I'm gonna look at them tomorrow with Jade.
Inside.
Exactly. And so we assume so, right? But the envelope and the historical integrity and the mirroring to the dam is super important. And we believe that's ultra important. Even the meeting you had today, where there was some historic value that we didn't know about some certain structures that used to be cabins and things. Those are things that are going to have to be sort of reconfigured and rethought through. Can they be repositioned and moved to more celebrated areas of the park so that everyone can see them upon entry and things of that nature? Is there truly a splash pad? How much engagement to the river do we actually have? There's lots of variables to this thing, right? And so this goes back to like the next step is to verify the program. Because if you want a more active park, there's a cost. If you want a more passive park, there's a cost. If we're going to integrate more art, we have other opportunities to get more art, there's a cost to that. While we put the art there, can we make it a more refined, beautiful piece by adding lighting? We also have to buy the foundation, and then, and seed it. And so there's lots of things that we have to kind of talk through for the next iteration of the park design that have not been discussed through the plan. And then again, that's like the exciting part. It's like what you see here isn't exactly going to be what it is tomorrow, but there's a process to get there. The question becomes, does everyone agree that, creating a riverfront icon that complements the village, that supports the quality of life, that creates a venue for the community to celebrate, that celebrates art, that celebrates the history of the community, and engagement of the river? Is that something that we want? We heard that you did from our process, but the question becomes back to you is like, are we truly there yet, or do we need more time to consider that?
Please jump a little more. So in the picture, you guys added a lot of docks or access points to the river below the dam. I think it really tied together nicely if there was one above the dam, so there by that table, like far in the park. There's a lot of people that access the river there, and it's not a safe point to do that. And I think if there was a dock, it would make it much safer as far as that.
Yeah, we can definitely, that's a great comment. Honestly, like we at some point, you're just gonna have to say, okay, this is enough to get to convey the idea. And if it has legs, then it goes, and if it doesn't. So yeah, we obviously we'll look at that area and we'll work with you guys to decide what that wants to be.
not that money doesn't matter, because it does matter. Be responsible with it, what they are doing, but this isn't coming out of general fund. This is separate from the DDA or the DDA project for enhancement of the DDA area to enhance it for businesses, residents in the area. I think that that's important. We do have one huge thing going for us that the DDA has been, we've talked about it, but we've talked about it. The district is large, and as much as I rip on not wanting 28th Street styles and stuff to keep coming down and kind of keep this area more quaint, we're so fortunate, like Ada doesn't have, our tax capture is that whole commercial district down 28th Street until Patterson. And so we're really fortunate in that our DDA has really good funding, and also it's, we may not have the relationships with the private parties that other communities have, but I think it's unusual to have the DDA that financially. We're so glad. Yeah.
But I also say with the scale of the project, I think we're gonna have to partner with the township to bring it to land the plane.
No, I think we've gone down. We'll talk,
Yeah.
we've talked, yeah. The township back.
Jade.
Another quick, comment, Grace has brought up the length of the district and the DDA, and someone had brought up earlier about consistency between stone and brick and the look and feel within the village area. Something that we've talked about at the DDA level too is streetscapes throughout the entire district. We're going all the way down 28th Street so that there's a uniform look. And when you get off the highway, you're coming into Cascade, you know you're here. And then, you know, people can be proud of that live here. And then when you get down here, this is the heart of the downtown. So whatever we do here will be used to kind of set that design as we move down 28th Street, and then again work with the road commission on what kind of streetscapes can we do. And what are those knee walls, like if we have knee walls or landscaping, because we want to create a brand of landscaping, and that can be carried throughout the district. So this has a lot more in it that can be used throughout the district.
Yeah, it's like what we said before. I think it was one of the first goals of the whole project. Ooh. What? Authentic brand and image. I think that it starts here. And then I think that we just proliferated, down 28th, in terms of the elements and the consistency of the materials, the signage, your brand, I think begins here, and then it gets replicated at the gateways of the community. And then all of a sudden it starts to become cohesive. It's like, I saw that and now I'm in this like village and I see it all over the place, and you start to tie it all together. Anybody else?
I think the one comment I would add to it as well is we brought a lot of residential homes. I know people are getting hung up on a little bit of, I don't know if I want that kind of density of people, but if our end goal is to have a feeling of the downtown, you do need to bring people. I think what you're trying to do is you're leading horse to water. If you have people instead of space, more people will come to the area as well, because it becomes a connection point for the community. So there has to be a balancing act. If we truly, we pass them to say we want a downtown feel. I think there is a residential aspect to it that is part of the vision, whether we're all kind of like, I don't know if that's Cascade or not. In order to get that vision to come together, I think there has to be a level of acceptance.
Very well said. That was the strategy all along. So it says we don't want to be this and we don't want to be that. Yep.
And I think it's also a balancing, and I think there's also a reality of not all of these parcels will be able to be activated. Some things that you just, maybe over 100 years, maybe, but in 20 years, you may get X%. But if you have that form-based code, which I kind of look at as that's your brand standard for Cascade. And so it's visually, you're going to start to transform it, and it needs to, transformation begets transformation. Yep. And so it just slowly kind of creeps and moves forward. And then we're starting to fulfill what the vision is, like just a downtown that feels walkable, people are engaging, and we want to spend time.
Jade.
Just one more time. I think what this also does, in regardless of the density or intensity or every parcel, or just a few parcels, having concepts like this really helps staff when we get people that come in that say, I want to do this here, I want to do that here. And we can say, well, that's not really a vision. And with that, there was a meeting that we had months and months ago, and people were questioning some of the density that were on the corner of Cascade and 28th Street, which is Walgreens. Well, that morning was when they announced that they were closing so many stores across the country. So what's important to think about is that this kind of sets like a roadmap. If all of a sudden a really key parcel comes up, we aren't making a decision, or the board is, or the DDA is not making a decision to say, hey, let's go buy that property. Should we do this? Should we do that? We kind of have an idea. You're never going to have it, decided completely. We're not the developer. But it gives an idea of someone that's coming to the table, say, hey, yeah, that Walgreens is closing, and this is a great site. I mean, that's a very key property in this entire project. And I'm sure it's not, it's the only one from my.
They like your store.
Yeah. I mean, that actually happened, and you never know when it's gonna happen, right? So just being prepared, I think. That helps.
I don't know how to wrap it up.
I know, I'm trying to think,
So I guess
change is scary.
interesting that the design up there, Walgreens is similar to what was there before Walgreens. The barber shop, libation station, the roadhouse, those, the building close to the road with the parking behind it. It's, what used to be there, 7,500 years ago is what we're trying to bring back.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Lots of irony there.
Yeah.
So you were up next step, Grace, Michelle, and I think the next steps are to consider, if people are on board with the park. We've heard a very rough high number. But if you want to move forward with the improvements on the park, especially in light of Tuffy coming down, we need to move to phase 2, which would be the final engineering design, design and engineering. Continue to work with the road commission. But how we go about that, and I know Tony and Josh are in the room, there's a couple different ways to you go with the firm that designed it, or you go out the street and there's a conversation with them later. Within the next month, we need to decide. I would ask that we decide what we're going to do with the park portion of it, because that's the part that we control, and then start that process. Okay. Because there's some financial consideration. There's funding mechanisms through the DDA. Lorna's been at the table. She was very late. She's on vacation. So there's funding mechanisms that have been looked at, scenarios have been looked at, and then obviously the design perspective. All that takes a little bit of time. So we got something down. I feel. So I would see that as the next step is engaging. We can do that.
I don't know how to wrap it up.
Well, so we, got an agenda item here to, we have some public visitors. And if there's any comments that any of our visitors have. Would you want to take a minute?
Hi, my name is Doug Lee. And when you draw your map up there, I happen to be in the bullseye of the downtown, the district. I can't be more in the center of all this. I own the Jam Bean Coffee Company. Okay. Officials back 20 years ago came to me and said, we have this eyesore. Do you want to make an investment into Cascade? Try to make us a walking community. I said, sure. What do you have in mind? He said, we got this old building here. It's pretty well condemned. Can you buy it and redo it? And I did. And I had to live to the standards based on the code and the planning. I could not change my facade. It's an old historical building. And I had to build that to the code that was on what you call form-based at the time. Well, they still told me I couldn't tear it down. I couldn't change the facade on the outside. There was a lot of things I couldn't do, so I had to work with this old structure, this old building. Okay, it's just. Bruce, who was, this is, I don't know, it's a long time ago. It's like 20 years ago. Yeah,
Bruce, Mr.
yeah. Yeah. And my point of all this is that we have the elephant in the room, if we're ever going to develop this ADA, is we have to, no person, no mom with a family of kids is going to want to walk across Cascade Road. I don't care what you do to that intersection. There's not going to happen. Okay, we're not going to make this a walking community until we lean into exactly what needs to happen. I've been to so many meetings of this planning, and we always tiptoe around it. But if you want to think long-term, you have to make this a walking community, and you have to slow down 28th Street. And that's going to require relationships with the road commissions, meeting Cascade Road. Okay. I know. I know, you have to think outside the box. Let me give you an example. The traffic going down there right now is diverted traffic.
Under the road, to connect to the other side. There's depth.
The cul-de-sac on Old 28th Street would slow it down too. You know that? There's different little things you do to slow it down. You can also create pathways where people don't want to come to the village to get to work because it takes them an extra 5 minutes. The construction right now has diverted the traffic. We now have diverted the traffic pattern because it's long enough, okay? Because that roadway is equipped, is 26,000, I think it was last I know, 26,000 cars a day. It could be more than that now, but that's what it was. That's a lot of cars. They're not going to go through this construction. They're going to find different ways around this. Okay, if you create ways that people want to get around it and avoid this village, then you're going to create a walking village without, and you're living within the rules of Cascade. You just have to think differently. Okay. Well, I think it is. I can be more specific. Okay, if we want to set a meeting with the road commission and put some ideas, I'd be more than happy to dedicate my time to show you ways to do it and get the road commission buy-in. Okay, you're going to spend $10 million. Hey, maybe we spend $15 million and solve a lifelong problem here. Maybe that's possible. If you could solve the problem, you know, I'm in the bill. I'm also in ADA. So okay. Okay. All right. So regarding ADA, because there's a lot of conversation with our neighborhood. Do you know the real winner in ADA is Revitalize? Why? Because they built outside the village and they have a huge parking lot. They're the real winners in ADA. Rest are not. I came to this meeting a month ago. I asked, when was the construction going to be done? I was told mid-May. So this is mid-May. So I had to plan my opening for my ice cream based on this because it just pretty much kills my entrance. It's fine. 2 days later, I hear on the radio, mid-June. Is it mid-May or is it mid-June? Well, no, I heard it from the radio. I'm telling you, the radio told me June. I thought, oh my gosh, I have to hire staff. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted clarification because when you hear it on Wood 8 or whatever it was, they said mid-June. I'm thinking, geez, I heard mid-May. Okay. Okay, I just needed clarification. Okay, all right, that's all I need. All right, my 3 minutes.
Anyone else?
Eric, you if you're not on the same.
Okay, we can move to Article 5 if someone like make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry. I was like,
Wrong team.
all in favor? Did you get a name? Oh, irrelevant name, never mind.
Also on the wrong table.